Hello there. Thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story. The War of the Worlds by hgwells. Book 2, Chapter 8, Dead London. After I had parted from the artillerymen, I went down the hill and by the high street across the bridge to Fulham. The red wheat was tumultuous at that time and nearly choked the bridge roadway, but its fronts were already whitened in patches by the spreading disease that presently removed it so swiftly. At the corner of the line that runs to Putney Bridge Station, I found a man lying. He was as black as a sweep with a black dust, alive, but helplessly and speechlessly drunk. I could get nothing from him but curses and furious lunges at my head. I think I should have stayed by him but for the brutal expression of his face. There was black dust along the roadway from the bridge onwards, and it grew thicker in Fulham. The streets were horribly quiet. I got food, sore, hard and mouldy, but quite eatable in a baker's shop here. Somewhere towards Welcome Street, the streets became clear of powder, and I passed a white terrace of houses on fire. The noise of burning was absolutely relief. Going on toward Brompton, the streets were quiet again. Here I came once more upon the black powder in the streets and upon dead bodies. I saw altogether about a dozen in the length of the Fulham Road. They had been dead many days, so that I hurried quickly past them. The black powder covered them over and softened their outlines. One or two had been disturbed by dogs. Where there was no black powder, it was curious, like a Sunday in the city, with the closed shops, the houses locked up and the blinds drawn, the desertion and the stillness. In some places, plunderers had been at work, but rarely at other than the provision and wine shops. A jeweller's window had been broken upon one place, but apparently the thief had been disturbed, and the number of gold chains and watches lay scattered on the pavement. I did not trouble to touch them. Further on was a tattered woman in a heap on a doorstep. The hand that hung over her knee was gashed and bled down, and a smashed magnum of champagne formed the pool across the pavement. She seemed asleep, but she was dead. The further I penetrated into London, the profounder grew the stillness. But it was not so much the stillness of death, it was the stillness of suspense, of expectation. At any time, the destruction that had already sinked the northwest borders of the metropolis and had annihilated Ealing and Kilburn might strike among these houses and leave them smoking ruins. It was a city condemned and derelict. In South Kensington, the streets were clear of dead and of the black powder. It was near South Kensington that I first heard the howling. It crept almost imperceptibly upon my senses. It was a sobbing alteration of the two notes, ooh, 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 keeping on perpetually. When I passed the streets that run northwards, it grew in volume, and the houses and the buildings seemed to deaden and cut off again. It came in a full tide down Exhibition Road. I stopped, staring towards Kensington Gardens, wondering at this strange, remote wailing. It was as if the mighty desert of houses had found a voice for its fear and solitude. Ooh, 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 while the superhuman note, great waves of sound sweeping down the broad, sunlit roadways between the tall buildings on each side. I turned northwards, marvelling towards the iron gate of Hyde Park. I had half a mind to break into the Natural History Museum and find my way up the summits of the towers in order to see across the park. But I decided to keep to the ground, where quickly hiding was possible, and so went up to the Exhibition Road. All the large mansions on each side of the road were empty and still, and my footsteps echoed against the side of the houses. At the top, near the park gate, I came upon a strange sight. A bus overturned and the skeleton of a horse picked clean. I puzzled over this for a time, and then went on to the bridge over the Serpentine. The voice grew stronger and stronger, that I could see nothing above the housetops on the north side of the park, save a haze of smoke to the northwest. "Ooh, ooh, ooh," cried the voice, coming, as it seemed to me, from the street above Regent's Park. The desolating cry worked upon my mind. The mood that had sustained me passed. The wailing took possession of me. I found I was intensely weary, footsore, and now again hungry and thirsty. It was already past noon. Why I was wandering alone in this city of dead? Why was I alone when all London was laying in state and in its black shroud? I felt intolerably lonely. My mind ran on old friends that I had forgotten for years. I thought of the poisons in the chemist's shops, of the liquors the wine merchants store. I recollect the two sodden creatures of despair, who, so far as I knew, shared the city with myself. I came into Oxford Street by the Marble Arch, and here again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell from the gratting of the cellars of some of the houses. I grew very thirsty after the heat of my long walk. With infinity trouble, I managed to break into a public house and get food and drink. I was weary after eating and went into the parlour behind the bar. I slept on the horsehair sofa I found there. I woke to find that decimal hooling still in my ears. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It was now dusk, and after I had rotted out some biscuits and cheese into the bar, I wandered on through the silent residence squares to the Baker Street. Portman Square is the only one I can name, and so came out at last upon Regent's Park. And as I emerged from the top of the Baker Street, I saw far away over the trees, in the clearness of the sunset, the hood of the Martian giant from which this howling proceeded. I was not terrified. I came upon him as if it were a matter of course. I watched him from some time, but he did not move. He appeared to be standing and yelling for no reason that I could discover. Ooh, 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 confused my mind. Perhaps I was too tired to be very fearful. Certainly, I was more curious to know the reason of this monotone crying than afraid. I turned back away from the park and struck into the park road. Intending to skirt the park, went along under the shelter of the terraces. I got a view of this stationary, cooling Martian from the direction of St. John's Wood. A couple of 100 yards out of Baker Street, I heard a yelping chorus, and saw first a dog with a piece of petruscent red meat in his jaws coming headlong toward me, and then a pack of starving Mongols in pursuit of him. He made a wide curve to avoid me, as though he feared I may prove a fresh competitor. As the yelping died away down the silent road, the wailing sound of ooh, 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 ooh reasserted itself. I came upon the wrecked handling machine halfway the St. John's Wood station. At first I thought the house had fallen across the road. It was only as I clambered among the ruins that I saw, with a start, this mechanical Samson laying, with its tentacles bent and smashed and twisted among the ruins it had made. The forepart was shattered. It seemed as if it had driven blindly straight at the house, and had been overwhelmed in its overthrow. It seemed to me then that this might have happened by a handling machine escaping from the guidance of its Martian. I could not clamber among the ruins to see it. and the twilight was now so far advanced that the blood with its seed was smeared, and the gnawed gresto of the Martians that the dogs had left were invisible to me. Wondering still more at all that I had seen, I pushed on towards Primrose Hill. Far away, through a gap in the trees, I saw a second Martian, as motionless as the first, standing in the park towards the zoological garden, and silent. A little beyond the ruins about the smashed handling machine, I came upon the red weed again, and found the Regent's Channel a spongy mass of dark red vegetation. As I crossed the bridge, the sound of ooh, ooh, ooh ceased. It was as it were cut off. The silence came like a thunderclap. The dusky houses about me stood faint and tall and dim. The trees towards the park were growing black. All about me, the red weed clambered among the ruins, waiting to get above me in the dimness. Night, the mother of fear and mystery, was coming upon me. But while the voice sounded the solitude, the desolation had been endurable by virtue if London had seemed alive and the sense of life about me had upheld me, then suddenly a change, the passing of something I knew not what, and then a stillness that could be felt, nothing but this gaunt quiet. London about me gazed at me spectrally. The windows in the white houses were like the eyes socked of skulls. About me, my imagination found 1,000 noiseless enemies moving. The terror seized me, a horror of my temerity. In front of me, the road became pitchy black, as though it was dark, and I saw a contorted shape playing across the pathway. I could not bring myself to go on. I turned down on St. James Wood Road and ran headlong from this unendurable stillness towards Kilburn. I hid from the night and the silence until long after midnight in a cabman's shelter in Harrow Road. But before the dawn, my courage returned, and while the stars were still in the sky, I turned once more towards Regent's Park. I missed my way among the streets, and presently saw down a long avenue, in the half-light of early dawn, the curve of Primrose Hill. On the summit, towards up the fading star, was a third Martian, erected and motionless like the others. An insane resolve possessed me. I would die and end it, and I would save myself even the trouble of killing myself. I marched on recklessly towards this Titan, and then, as I drew nearer and the light grew, I saw that a multitude of black birds were circling and clustering about the hood. At that, I began running along the road. I hurried through the red weed that choked St. Edmund's Terrace. I waded breast high across the torrent of water that was rushing down from the waterworks toward the Albert Road, and emerged upon the grass before the rising of the sun. Great mounds had been hit about the crest of the hill, making a huge redoubt of it. It was the final and the largest place the Martians had made, and from behind these heaps there rose a skin smoke. Against the skyline, an eager dog ran and disappeared. The thought that had flashed in my mind grew real, grew credible. I felt no fear, only a wild, trembling exultation as I ran up the hill towards the motionless monster. Out of the hood hung a long shred of brown, at which the hungry birds picked and tore. In another moment I had crumbled up the earthen rampart and stood upon its crest, and the interior of the redoubt was below me. A mighty space it was, with giant machines here and there, with its huge mounds of material and strange shelter places, and scattered about it, some in their overturned war machine, some in the now rigid handling machines, and a dozen of them, stark and silent and laid in a row, were the Martians, dead slain by the putrefactive and disease bacteria against which their system were unprepared. Slain as the red wheat was being slain, slain after all man's device had failed, by the humblest thing that God, in his wisdom, had put upon the earth. For so it had come about, as indeed I and many men might have foreseen had not terror and disaster blinded our minds. These germs of disease have taken toll of humanity since the beginning of things, taken toll of our pre-human ancestors since life began here. By the virtue of this natural selection of our kind, we had developed resisting power to no germs to be succumbed without a struggle, and to many, those that cause putrefaction in the dead matter, for instance, our living frame are altogether immune. But there are no bacteria on Mars, and directly these invaders arrived, directly they drank and fed. Our microscopic allies began to work their overthrow. Already, when I watched them, they were irrevocably doomed, dying and rotting, even as they went to and from. It was inevitable. By the toll of billion deaths, man has brought his birthright of this earth, and it is his against all comers. It would be still his were the Martian 10 times as mighty as they are, for neither do men live or die in vain. Here and there they were scattered, nearly 50 altogether, in that great gulfy they had made, overtaken by a death that must have seemed to them as incomprehensible as any death could be. To me also at that time this death was incomprehensible. All I knew was that these things that had been alive and so terrible to men were dead. For a moment I believed that the destruction of Sennacherib had been repeated, that God had repeated, that the angel of death had slain them in the night. I stood staring into the pit, and my heart lightened gloriously, even as the rising sun struck the world to fire about me with his rays. The pit was still in darkness. The mighty engines, so great and wonderful in their power and complexity, so unearthly in their tortuous form, rose weird and vague and strange out of the shadows towards the light. A multitude of dogs I could hear fought over the bodies that lay darkly in the depth of the pit. Far below me, across the pit, on its further lip, flat and vast and strange, lay the great flying machine which they had been experimenting upon our dense atmosphere when decay and death arrested them. Death had come not a day too soon. At the sound of the cawing overhead, I looked up at the huge fighting machine that would fight no more forever, at the tattered red shred of flesh that dripped down upon the overturned seat on the summit of the primrose hill. I turned and looked down the slope of the hill to where, unhauled now in birds, stood these other 2 Martians that I had seen overnight. Just as death had overtaken them, the one had died even as it had been crying to its companions. Perhaps it was the last to die, and its voice had gone on perpetually until the forces of its machinery was exhausted. They glittered now, harmless tripod towers of shining metal in the brightness of the rising sun, all about the pit, and saved as my miracle from everlasting destruction, stretched the great mother of cities. Those who have only seen London veiled in her sombre robes of smoke can scarcely imagine the naked clearness and beauty of the silent wilderness of houses. Eastwards, over the blackened ruins of the Albert Terrace and the splintered spire of the church, the sun blazed dazzlingly in a clear sky and here and there some facets in the great wilderness of roofs caught the light and glared with a white intensity. Northward were Kilburn and Hampstead, blue and crowded with houses. Westward the great city was dimmed, and southwards, beyond the Martians, the green waves of Regent's Park, the Langham Hotel, the dome of the Albert Hall, the Imperial Institute, and the great mansions of the Brompton Road came out clear and little in the sunrise. The jagged ruins of Westminster rising hazily beyond. Far away and blue were the Surrey hills, and the tower of the Crystal Palace glittered like two silver rods. The dome of the St. Paul's was dark against the sunrise. I saw for the first time huge gaping cavity on its western side, and as I looked at the wide expanse of houses and factories and churches, silent and abandoned, I thought of the multitudinous of hope and effort, the innumerable host of lives that had gone to build this human reef, and of the swift and ruthless destruction that had hung over it all. When I realized that the shadow had been rolled back, and that men might still live in the streets, and this dear vast dead city of mine be once more alive and powerful, I felt a wave of emotion that was near akin to tears. The torment was over. Even that day the healing would begin. The survivors of the people scattered over the country, leaderless, lawless, foodless, like sheep without shepherd. The thousands who had fled by sea would begin to return. The pulse of life, growing stronger and stronger, would beat again in the empty street and pour across the vacant squares. Whatever destruction was done, the hand of the destroyer was slain. All the gun wrecks, the blackened skeletons of the houses that stared so dismally at the sunlit grass of the hill, would presently be echoing with the hammers of the restorers and rings with the tapping of their throwers. At the thought, I extended my hands towards the sky and began thanking God. In a year, I thought, in a year. With overwhelming force came the thought of myself, of my wife, and the old life of hope and tender helpfulness that had ceased forever. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, and if you like it, please leave a comment. Bye for now.